Well, good afternoon and thanks for watching THV 11 News at Noon. I'm Amanda Jaeger in for Michael Aaron. Meteorologist Nathan Scott is here. I know you're recovering from this weekend's winter weather. I'm sure you were so busy and we got so many amazing pictures. And what were the snowfall totals, Nathan?
Well, as expected, Amanda, we knew the jackpot zone was going to be the highest elevations of the Ozarks, and that certainly was the case. Look at these totals. The highest I could find, Valley Springs in Boone County, over a foot of snow, but certainly Searcy County, Boone County, Newton County, those locations saw well over 10 inches, and that's just because they were in the colder air for the longest period of time. You can still see the snow showing up in north and northwest Arkansas. That white, those are not clouds. That is snow being seen from space, and look at the temperature difference. Where that snow cover is, they're stuck into the upper 30s. That's because snow reflects a lot of the sun's light back out into space. Here in central Arkansas, though, we don't have any snow cover, and temperatures have already warmed up into the low 50s. A little bit of a breeze makes it feel a little bit cooler out there. Feels like numbers dropping down into the 40s. But here's your hour by hour. I think highs today, mid 50s, maybe even some low 60s down into South Arkansas. So a beautiful day across the region with plenty of sun. We're going to do it again on Tuesday, even warmer, but then big changes and winter returns going into the middle part of the work week. I'll have more details on that situation coming up.
Developing news out of Hot Springs Village this afternoon. Police there are searching for a missing person on Lake Desoto after two kayaks capsized Sunday afternoon. Officers were dispatched to the North Shore and found two people helping a woman whose kayak capsized. But the man she was with was missing after the accident. We've reached out to Hot Springs Village Police for the latest on the search. Stay with THV 11 and thv-at-noon.com for more on this developing story. New at noon, police in the UK say they've arrested two teenagers in connection with the hostage situation at a Texas synagogue over the weekend. It's unclear if they're facing charges. Officials say 44-year-old Malik Faisal Akram, a British citizen, was responsible for the standoff. Omar Villafranca is following the investigation in Colleyville, Texas.
For nearly 11 hours on Saturday, law enforcement stood ready outside of Congregation Beth Israel. Inside, 4 hostages were held at gunpoint, their Saturday services interrupted by Malik Faisal Akram.
We're still processing. It's been a lot. It's completely overwhelming.
Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker was one of the hostages.
Some of his story didn't quite add up, so I was a little bit curious, but that's not necessarily an uncommon thing. Right before he revealed himself, but this was, plenty of time in, I heard a click. And it could have been anything, and it turned out that it was his gun.
Officials say 44-year-old Akram asked negotiators for the release of Afia Siddiqui, who is currently in federal prison in Texas for the attempted murder of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. She's suspected of having ties to al-Qaeda and has even been called Lady al-Qaeda. In a statement, Siddiqui's legal counsel said, "We want the assailant to know that his actions are wicked and directly undermine those of us who are seeking justice for Dr. Afia." Shortly after 5 p.m., Akram released one of the hostages. After 4 more hours of negotiations, the FBI's elite hostage rescue team, flown in from their base in Quantico, Virginia, moved in.
I threw a chair at the gunman, and I headed for the door. And all 3 of us were able to get out without even a shot being fired.
After a loud bang and the sound of gunshots, Akram was dead, and all 4 hostages were safe.
The rabbi says he and the other hostages were able to escape in part because they had gone through safety and active shooter training over the last several years. And the numbers show that training is needed. In 2020, the ADL recorded the 3rd highest number of anti-Semitic incidents since they started tracking that in 1979. Omar Villafranca, CBS News, Colleyville, Texas.
Coronavirus cases continue to surge both across the country and right here in Arkansas. Over the weekend, we saw just under 17,000 new cases reported in the state. That's a near 40% increase from last weekend. Hospitalizations continue to rise over the weekend. Right now, close to 1,400 people are fighting the virus from a hospital bed. That's up 100 since Friday. And looking at active cases, we could surpass 100,000 this week. Looking at our current number, about 1 in every 31 Arkansans are currently dealing with a COVID-19 infection. Nationally, the surge of new COVID cases brought on by Omicron continues to set new records. For the first time, COVID cases in the U.S. have hit 800,000 per day. Meanwhile, a new CBS News poll shows President Biden's rating on handling the pandemic is down to the lowest point in his presidency, with just 36% of those surveyed saying COVID response is going well. The new poll comes as the administration prepares to launch a website this week to deliver free COVID tests to Americans. And many are starting to wonder what COVID-19 and the way we respond to it could look like in the future. And those thoughts are bringing up discussions of what's called an endemic. Kenny Choi explains what that means and what it could take to get to that point.
Experts say if you can protect yourself for the next few weeks, the Omicron wave will pass.
Well, look, I think the reality is most people are going to get COVID in their lifetime. I don't think most people need to get COVID within the next month.
The combination of a lack of easily accessible rapid at-home tests, long lines for PCR tests, and now lengthy delays in getting results has made that goal of maximum protection difficult as testing demand remains high.
What the delay in testing is doing is it's perpetuating the surge because it doesn't allow us to get a good handle on the virus and who's contagious with it.
UCSF Department of Medicine Chair Dr. Bob Wachter says the odds an asymptomatic person in this country has COVID near the Omicron peak is about 10%. That means if you enter a room with 20 people, there's an 88% chance that one of them has COVID.
I would much rather have my reckoning with COVID after I've been vaccinated a number of times, after there's orally available drugs widely accessible to treat this infection.
Infectious disease specialist Dr. Monica Gandhi believes this Omicron surge should lead public health officials to change their approach from containment to instead harm reduction and ultimately trigger an endemic phase.
What Omicron did is it caused an incredible wall of immunity. It means unvaccinated people got it. People who are vaccinated even got it.
In an endemic phase, there would be no reporting of daily infections and no asymptomatic testing. But vaccinations and treatment with oral antivirals for people at risk of severe disease would continue.
We also don't tell people to mask and distance anymore because that's really had to do with trying to keep it at bay. But when you go into endemic phase, you treat it like influenza.
And according to the doctor there, masking indoors will likely continue, especially in the winter, even without mandates, similar to what so many countries have done before this pandemic. Meanwhile, the CDC just released new guidance on what masks offer the best protection against this new mutation. On its website, the CDC says loosely woven cloth masks provide the least protection, and well-fitting respirators, including N95s, offer the most. But there's one main point Dr. Joel Tumlison with the Arkansas Department of Health wants to get across.
You're just more likely to encounter someone infectious with COVID right now than any other time previously during the pandemic. If I could say what the best mask right now is, the one that you have on your face, covering your mouth and nose, and can leave on.
You've also probably noticed how much the price has gone up on these masks right now. We have details on how to avoid price gouging for the masks on thv-at-noon.com. And with the way this pandemic is affecting our economy, businesses are facing increased costs and passing them along to consumers. A Russellville woman tells us she noticed a new surcharge when she checked out. So THV11's Ashley Godwin asked the Better Business Bureau whether this is allowed.
I was surprised to see that on my receipt.
THV11 viewer Camilla Kinslow bought paint from the Sherwin-Williams in Russellville. After she left, she noticed an additional charge on her receipt. A 4% supply chain surcharge.
I was kind of frustrated, like, how can they do this? How can people just do that?
It's because of COVID-19 shortages affecting the supply chain. There are less materials in the market, which makes costs rise. In turn, the inflation is falling back on you, the customer. And it's not just Sherwin-Williams. Other companies are finding ways to even out expenses during these times without raising prices. FedEx has added a fuel surcharge for certain deliveries.
Consumers may see more of these as the supply chain disruptions continue.
Kara with Better Business Bureau of Arkansas says we see surcharges in our everyday life, like with credit cards. And it's legal as long as the surcharges are reasonable.
But there is a fine line between a fair surcharge and an unfair one.
The good news is these surcharges are likely to be temporary. Camilla's receipt from Sherwin-Williams said the surcharge will continue to the end of the month. But if you want to avoid surcharges, the Better Business Bureau suggests you ask the business if there are any surcharges and what they are. Compare prices with other businesses and research before you buy.
Do your research, make sure that you're getting the best deal possible and that you're protected on the back end of the buy as well.
In Little Rock, Ashley Godwin, THV11 News.
If you're concerned that you've been charged unfairly, you can contact the Attorney General's office and file a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. Time now 12:10, and Martin Luther King Jr. Day is today, and organizations are hosting several events in honor of his life and legacy. Little Rock's NAACP hosted a virtual parade this morning, focusing on issues in marginalized communities. There's also the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission's Day of Impact, Day of Service event happening right now. And then later this afternoon, the Day of Service Unity March kicks off at Philander Smith. You can get details on those events and others at thv-at-noon.com. And millions of people are in path of a massive winter storm making its way up the Northeast this week. More on the threats, including wind gusts of 70 miles per hour after the break. Nathan.
We're going to see a brief warm-up going into the next couple days, but then an Arctic blast is going to invade as early as Thursday. And you'll be looking for the winter coats and anything to keep you warm once again. I'll let you know how cold it's going to get coming up.